I'm Zack Holt, and I'm here with Darren Podraza. We both work for the City of Port Orchard Public Works Department, and we're here to talk to you guys a little bit about how we're using drones to integrate inspection and permit compliance into our daily activities. To give you guys a little bit of a backstory, before we introduce ourselves, our city is a pretty small city for the most part. Up until a recent annexation, we were about 8 or 9,000 residents, and we didn't have a whole lot of development happening within town. I remember when I started here back in 2015, I think we got 8 land disturbing activity permits for the entire year that I was there. And just this year alone, I think we're well over 80. Building permits, we were having 100 to maybe 120 back in 2015, and now we've already exceeded 600 this far, and we still have half a year to go. So we've been going through some pretty difficult growing pains, trying to find ways to increase efficiencies and improve our production. And using drones has been one of the ways that we've been able to do that to keep with our permit compliance. So I'm going to move in a little bit to who we are. And a little bit about us. So my background is in environmental science. I'm an environmental scientist. I'm UW trained. My emphasis is actually mostly in marine aquatic biology and phycology, but through different jobs over the years, I kind of ping-ponged myself into stormwater. I had a previous excursion with the Department of Ecology for a few years. I worked for the Washington State Department of Transportation for several years as well before I came to the city of Port Orchard. Currently, I manage the Stormwater and Watersheds program here. And as the picture shows, I am an unapologetic dog lover and currently have 2 dogs in my office right now at work. So if there is any barking, I apologize. I will do my best, but it is lunchtime and these guys are used to stealing snacks. So yeah, moving on from me. Darren, you want to talk a little bit about yourself? I can say what's on the slides, but you can give them a little rundown on your background.
Yeah, my background is in municipal utilities, GIS. For the city of Port Orchard, I do the GIS work for Public Works and the Public Works inspecting. Also, obviously, from the slide, I'm a dog lover. I have my own at home and enjoy feeding Zack's dogs lunch and spoiling them.
So a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. One of the things that's most important for us to use these drones is municipal inspections. I'm going to talk a little bit about what has happened by incorporating drones into the way that we do business here. And I'll give a couple examples on some of the things that we've been using them for. And like Lori was saying, hopefully at the end of this, we can make an attempt to show some examples of some of our footages on one of them on a large scale plat that we have that's over 104 acres, and another one of a marine application for environmental condition assessment. So I'm going to talk about the first 3 slides, the first 3 bullets here, sorry, and Darren's going to go ahead and go into the details on what goes into the inspection program, since I'm not a certified pilot for the drone program, but Darren is. So with that, I can talk a little bit about some of the typical things we do. We use drones for improving our inspections for our construction stormwater general permits, our industrial stormwater general permits that we have, and our municipal permit inspections that are required. We also have dams in the city of Port Orchard, so we use these for our periodic dam inspections. Once for the annual and for anything periodic after large storm events to make sure we don't have any issues with structural integrity of our dams. Like I'd said previously, we do use the drone on occasion for environmental issues. We've had some storm events where we've found streams downstream of the city that have had issues with inundation from sediments that we've partnered with local jurisdictions to fly the drone over a watershed to try and determine if there are like point failures on slopes where there may have been a landslide, if there are issues potentially caused by development, if we've impacted wetland processes, If there's been any issues in streams, et cetera. We also use these for flyovers for capital project inspections, and it's actually a really cool tool to use when talking to your council or commissioners, because you can show them pretty quickly aerial footage of processes with capital improvement projects. We had some great ones that I didn't include in this presentation, sequencing a lift station, a major lift station that we installed within the city. And we just kind of folded imagery over and over for progress on the project, and the council was very pleased to see that. So traditionally, when we first started here, Darren and I started about the same time. When we started with the city, inspections required a ton of footwork. We would come out on a site, usually for like a clearing limit inspection or pre-clearing erosion sediment control inspections. And it was muck boots, sometimes waders, depending upon the type of conditions, and lots of walking with notebooks and cameras in rain, sometimes in sun, depending upon the season. And what we noticed over time with the increase in the number of permits that were coming in, we were having a harder and harder time staying on top of our inspections. The NPDES municipal permit requires a minimum of a 6-month inspection for construction. And we were finding that the rate of change on these sites was happening so much faster than that 6-month minimum requirement. We were having to get out there more frequently. And some of the stuff that we were helping ecology with for construction general permits was improved by these drone processes as well. We could send emails giving informational updates to the ecology inspectors to keep them in the loop on things that may or may not be progressing on these sites. So in a nutshell, using your drone can really help with improving your inspections and the data that you collect from them. We don't walk every time. We go out usually for clearing limits inspections, and after they clear, we'll do another site visit, either a drive-through or a walk-through. But we don't, on periodics for us, we go in and we use the drone. I do need to give the caveat that a drone flyover does not substitute for a formal inspection for your municipal permits. You still have to go out there, you still have to document your field observations in the forms, and we use the Herrera documentation for construction inspection that is available online as well. I believe it's at the Stormwater Center, and I think there's a few other spots on the ecology website that you can get that documentation. And we just changed the logos on it and updated a little bit here and there for what we include in those inspections. The cool thing is you can cover a ton of ground really quickly, and you can see subtle changes pretty easily from the aerial footage on the plat as a whole or the individual construction sites. To give you an example, that 104-acre lot or plat that I was telling you about at the beginning of this usually would take us about 4 hours plus to do an inspection on foot, because they didn't want us driving on their site because we had the potential to create erosion by taking our vehicles on site in certain areas. So a lot of it was footwork. So 4 hours to 6 hours in some instances, depending upon conditions. The drone flight took that time down to 9 minutes. So we get out, we set up, we get the drone up in the air, we record usually for anywhere from 5 to 7 minutes. And it really depends on what we're looking for at that moment in time, or if we catch something that we need to get more resolution on. It's really useful for that repeat documentation I was talking about, because we can follow those same flight paths to show subtle changes over time. And hopefully you guys will be able to see some of that at the end of this if it's not too clunky and the videos don't skip. They're fairly high resolution, and with streaming, we sometimes have some hiccup issues with that. So I've talked a little bit about how drones have improved our inspection program, but again, back to the time use and efficiency. We can cover more ground quickly if all we have to do is go out and do a 9-minute flight on a big plat. We have several large plats with open ground right now that we can't always do those big site visits. So it helps us to prioritize which ones need more frequent follow-up, which ones are doing really pretty good, and we can just kind of let them do their thing. It helps us with documentation because we can get those videos, we can get those photos. And like I said, combination of individual lot inspections from the air really help when we can do it at the same time as a larger plat inspection. So this is an image of an example of what we would look for on like an individual lot here. And I don't know if you guys can see my cursor. I'm hoping so. But one of the things that we would look for on a visit like this where we fly over is, are there any compromises to the silt fence in comparison to the plan that is approved? Are these guys using their BMPs appropriately? You can see a guy here folding out some plastic. It looks like they're getting ready to start digging on their stockpile here. There's no construction site inspect entrance to this yet, but they've pulled their silt fence back, and it looks to me, based on what I'm seeing here, that they've started to put some quarry spalls down to get their individual lot entrance in place. So we do have a little bit of track out here, but they're looking to follow all that compliance. A lot of these guys have switched on our individual lots with these types of plats to using pumper trucks, so they don't have to back their trucks in and out on these driveways. They just boom out and they fill a lot of their foundations from the main roadway. For this specific plat here, you'll notice some weird kind of chevrons. These guys only did a first overlay of about 1.5 inches of asphalt here because they were anticipating a lot of issues with machinery movement, etc. So for us, we like to see this because after the fact, when they finish up all these lots, they come in and they do that final lift of asphalt, and we have a really smooth, seamless driveway and road system through this plat that looks good, isn't chewed up by development, and it's more beneficial for us in the end for the product that we get. But yeah, for this, I mean, we can really do a quick look from the air and compare it to a two-dimensional plan sheet for what's happening here, where their progress is, etc. This is that same plat the image that we were looking at is around the corner here, but you can see there's kind of sporadic development going on throughout this plat. So for us to do a full plat flyover, it really gives us more of that holistic view on where they're at, what the phases are going in, what different phases are changing for the development here. And, we keep that log to supplement those periodic inspections that are required by these permits. We also use this for outreach to the contractors to identify red flags. I mean, you can see right here, we had a storm forecast for a couple days in advance of this, and these guys weren't able to get the water out of their pond to be able to discharge it. But the rain events that would come in, as you can see here, with 192 NTU sample out of that pond, that's a big red flag for us. So we got on the phone with these guys and said, you need to find an alternative method because your BMPs are not meeting the criteria for what's showing in your pond here. I mean, the prescriptive says if it looks like chocolate milk in your pond, it's pretty soon to come out of your pond as chocolate milk to the receiving water as well. So they had to do something. What we found out after the fact with these guys was based on their construction activities, their source control was, they did a risk on this and they let their source control kind of lapse. And we had a small rain event that incorporated a bunch of turbid water into these different ponds. And so what these guys did was they kind of panicked and they said, what do we do? And we told them, the menu for the stormwater manual has lots of BMP options, but in a situation like this with the size of this plat, you guys may want to do some kind of a filtration system. So they went out and they picked up a Kaidasan system within a couple of days from United Rentals, and they were able to get it on site here and manage the water in their ponds using treatment to be able to discharge and meet the requirements. So for us, it was really a useful tool to be able to get in front of problems. We did talk with them fairly frequently to maintain where they were at. Their treatment staff was keeping records of all their treatment processes, when the pumps were running, et cetera. So we were able to check on it frequently. And then after the wet season, they were able to amend and fix their source control issues, and the problem has abated itself. So one of the other benefits of using these drones is perspective. You can see in the picture on the left here, when we're on the ground and we get out of a vehicle and we're looking at, the different lot layers here, you can see the different pads for these lots at rough grade. It looks like that grass isn't too bad. But when we get the drone up over the top of it, you can see that it's much patchier and more sparse than what we can really see without getting out there and walking each individual lot. So having a quick flyover here really benefited us to say, hang on, guys, you need to address this. We're going to probably need more hydroseed or an alternative BMP to get you guys in compliance with where you need to be. So some of our other types of inspections that we were talking about at the beginning, the dam safety inspections. This is one of our registered dams in Port Orchard. This is a stormwater pond, but it meets the criteria of a dam because this thing has the potential to withhold 10 acre-feet of water in its design. So by that, it's considered a jurisdictional dam by ecology. So we have to have a whole different protocol for how we manage and maintain this facility. So we have to do these inspections frequently. There are several other jurisdictional dams within our city, but most of them are managed by private facilities, and they aren't high hazard dams like this dam here. As you can see here, we've got a housing tract that was built in a different jurisdiction just downstream of this wall. Now the water runs this way off stream here to another receiving water downhill. But in the event of a failure, we have to have a lot of contingency plans to protect this downstream plat from issues that could occur here. So it's with high risk comes a lot of inspection, a lot of engineering, and a lot of oversight. So the dam safety inspections, I can send in to ecology an overview with a close hover over the top of our two control structures here, our inlet structure, which is over here, our secondaries, which are along this berm here. You can kind of see one here and one here, and show the integrity of both of the berms on this, so they can see not only are we submitting our inspection reports, we can also submit these documentations so they can cross-check it against what we've kept in our notes. It's been really helpful for us with these submittals. Another one is part of our requirements are responding to the 2-year 24-hour storm events afterwards to see if we've had any issues. The plat that this picture was taken from, it didn't really have a lot of issues other than some rilling here and there and a couple of small sediment issues onto roadways that were fairly easy to manage for the contractor. But with this downstream outlet being down a high hazard slope quite a ways from the plat, we were not really authorized to go down here because there were trees falling down during this storm event, and human safety trumps this inspection. But after the calm came, we were able to fly the drone over it and get some footage of what had happened. And we actually had a landslide that started right about here that ended up taking out the underside of this facility, blowing out a lot of the engineered design control here and causing an issue. We were able to work with local jurisdictions and the contractor to get an engineered solution to this shortly thereafter that they were able to implement and fix the problem. Another issue that we have been having regionally here is on-water living practices. Most of Washington State is seeing issues with homelessness, and for us being a waterfront city, we're seeing it in the form of boats, people that aren't able, and sunken boats in some instances as well, as the image shows here. People that aren't able to afford housing are finding boats that are cheap or nearly free and purchasing them and taking them out to anchor in our harbor here, and then rowing rowboats into town to get supplies, etc. And they're living here outside of what the Coast Guard deems as a reasonable living. Most of these vessels aren't licensed and can't take port of call in the vessel to be able to resupply, refuel, etc. So they just anchor out here. And so we've had several issues with these as well, that our drone has been able to give us a lot of footage and track locations of these boats as they sit here to make sure we're not doing anything in violation of nautical law. They do have a right to be here, but only for a certain amount of time without pulling up anchor and moving off water or to another destination. So for this, it's been helpful for us, and we just notify our police department as we see changes in this, and the police department can enforce as needed. So we've talked a little bit about what we've benefited from by having a drone program, but we should probably talk a little bit here about what goes into establishing that drone program. And this is where I'm going to turn it over to Darren, because like I said, Darren's the pilot for the city. We have one of our engineers, Ian, he is also a pilot as well, but Darren's the primary pilot that flies missions for us to get information from these different job sites, environmental sites, and overwater applications here. So I'm going to turn it over to Darren, and just let me know when you need me to advance the slides, Darren.
Sure, yeah. Thanks, Zach. So starting a drone program, first and most importantly, you need to get yourself a pair of aviator sunglasses. That's number one. So you need a policy. Our policy that we have at the city here, I'm sure we can share, and people can kind of take it and make it their own. But we update our policy every 2 years. You need a pilot that is Part 107 licensed certified. You can study for that and get it at any FAA testing center, and I'll give you a little bit more on that in a minute. You need a drone that meets your needs. We have, shown in the picture here, is a DJI Phantom 4 Pro. It's an incredibly easy drone to fly. It has sensors on it, so if you're flying towards a building and it gets too close, it just stops. And it has GPS, so that if it runs out of radio signal or you want to hit the home button, you can't see it anymore, it's out of sight, you hit the home button and it just flies the same path that went out there. If you went up and over some trees, it'll go back up over the trees and come back and land. So it's an incredibly easy drone to fly, very safe drone. You need to establish a policy. Next slide, Zach, sorry. Establish a policy that is unique to each jurisdiction. Determine limitations and allowable uses, usual use, emergency use, etc. Establish privacy policy and allowable usages. So for privacy policy, for me, I like to think of it personally as, is there a reasonable expectation of privacy? And so if somebody has a fenced-in backyard or something like that next to our construction site, I try to avoid getting any footage from inside their yard. They would have a reasonable expectation of privacy there. Some of our policy highlights are only employees with a UAS remote pilot license can operate the city-owned drone. Keeping it simple, the rules and regulations for flying the drone are not outlined in the policy. Knowing and understanding the rules for flying a drone is the responsibility of the UAS licensed employee. Flight records and pre-flight checklists are required to be kept. Drone cannot be used for personal use. Privacy policy to protect residents. And emergency use policy can be applied for agencies to violate restrictive Part 107 rules in the event of an emergency. Next slide, Zach. So getting your Part 107 UAS remote pilot license, I took an online class and I'm a mapping guy. I do the GIS for the city, and there's a lot of mapping questions from a pilot's perspective on the test. I'd say 50% of the test is mapping questions. And I didn't really glean, I was taking their test at the end of this online course, and I didn't really glean what I needed from it. I didn't feel like my knowledge was, like it wasn't covered in the material almost. And the best resource that I have found, and you could probably watch this guy's video a couple times on YouTube and go in and pass the test. And if you look up Part 107 on YouTube, you'll find a guy, it's about an hour and 45-minute video, and his name is Tony Northup. And if you watch that video a couple times, he breaks it down into small segments about the mapping, what you're looking for, what kind of questions are asked. And I found that very useful, and it made it quite easy to just go in and take the test and get a passing grade. Next slide, Zach. So stay current with Part 107 updates. Rules can change on occasion, so it's important to be current on the FAA updates. And the new rules are you don't have to go back to the testing center to re-up your Part 107 license. You can just get online and do a refresher and take the online test, and then you just print that out and take it with you. You don't need to go back to a testing center once you're certified. Make sure your policy is updated to reflect changes. Examples of Part 107 updates are recent policy changes are you can fly above pedestrians given the drone meets specifications. You can fly above vehicles given the area in question is restricted private property and individuals in the vehicle are made aware of the flight. 2-year in-center testing no longer required. I just covered that. To keep licenses active, every 2 years the license holder must take a knowledge test online, free, and print the certificate to keep with the licensed pilot when operating the drone. Next slide. Documents and procedures. Flight logs are a must. That's part of our drone policy. We have a pre-flight checklist. You know, is the SD card in there? Is the battery charged and in the drone? And you go down the checklist. And getting prior authorization if needed to fly. Here in Port Orchard, we have about half of our jurisdiction is covered by an airport's airspace. And so in order to fly around that, the further you get away from the airport, the higher you can fly. But so if you're close to the airport, you might only be able to get up 50 feet. If you're out, you know, a mile from the airport, you can probably get up 400 feet. And then after that, there's no restriction. And so I used to use a different app. I don't remember what it is, but it seems like lately Before You Fly is the best app. It used to take 30 days to get permission from the flight tower to fly in restricted airspace. And now it's instant. You get on Before You Fly, it knows your GPS location based on where your phone's at, and it says, hey, here's your limitations. You know, you can only fly 200 feet here. What's your flight going to be? And you say it's 195 feet, and it's going to be a half an hour duration, and you get instant access from the tower, and then you're good to fly. If a spotter is needed, sometimes that's a good thing to have with you. Sometimes Zack will go out with me. He can kind of keep an eye on the drone. Where's it at in the sky? Is there other planes coming while I'm flying the drone? A lot of times, 2 sets of eyeballs is better than 1. If there's a plane coming or something, we do have some areas of the city where they fly pretty low coming out of the airport and so on. So it's, hey, there's a plane coming. It looks like it's you know, headed this direction. So you can just kind of bring the drone down towards ground level and avoid any conflicts there. Our typical routine would be map out the task of the flight. What is it we're trying to do? Stormwater, we'll check the perimeter of the silt fence on a site or whatever. Check the equipment, complete pre-flight checklist, apps to support this effort, permission from the from the airport tower, fill out the flight log, head to the site with the second employee as a spotter. The second person is only a recommendation. It's not required. It's only required when the pilot is using a VR headset. I generally don't use those. They don't work too well with me needing glasses. The people that don't need glasses, they work pretty well for. Fly drone and take video and images and flag areas of concern to see if additional field exploration is required. Now, when you take a picture with the drone, it is geotagged with the GPS location, and that's oftentimes really convenient too, like that outfall Zack was showing earlier. And that's all I have, Zack.
Sorry, I muted myself. So that pretty much covers what we wanted to get out there about this, some of the stuff that we've gone through to get this set up. I did want to take a couple minutes to see if we could show some videos for you guys to see what the aerial footage looks like. I have one that's in a YouTube video and another one that I'm pulling off the network. The network one might be kind of clunky, but I can show you first here the, let me change my screen here. And I can show you, start with this one. So this is the YouTube video of the flyover of our on-water living boat situation that we had at the end of last year, right before the weather changed for the winter time. You can see the sunken boat in the front there. We've been working a lot with the derelict vessel program as well through DNR to manage a lot of this, and they've been awesome to work with. They just got it sounds like they got budget approval to increase their budget for derelict vessel assistance. but there's another one on the beach right there off in the corner you can see. So those are derelict vessels, but some of these out here floating don't meet the criteria for derelicts. So if you guys are having on-water living practice issues, I definitely recommend reaching out to DNR and talking to their derelict vessel program. But as you can see, we can really cover a lot more ground quickly here than on a boat trying to go boat to boat with these guys. Plus, it's a lot less of that upfront interaction if we're just trying to see, have these boats moved, etc. Sometimes these guys don't want us coming near them, and they can get somewhat frustrated with us if we are. So having a quick flyover like this has been beneficial for us to avoid conflicts, etc. So yeah, I don't know, Darren, do you have anything else that you can think of for how we've used this while we let it play?
I think you covered most of it. It's great. Some of our sites have gotten into the 100-acre, 80-acre, 100-acre, and like Zach touched on, it can take 6 hours to visit one of those sites and go over it. But I think it's particularly useful in the past if we were having a problem site, we're trying to explain it to the directors and so on. And they would have to take time on their calendar to go meet out there with us, kind of review things before it escalated to maybe a red tag. And the drone gives us the ability to kind of get a little 5-minute flyover, upload it to Dropbox, send them a link. They can stay right in their office, and in 5 minutes, they kind of have a pretty good overview of what the site looks like.
So yeah, let's take a look at that one of those large sites that we were just talking about as well. And this is the one that I'm afraid might be a little bit more slow moving. And at the beginning, I do have to apologize. There is a bit of back and forth, but it's mostly for us for which part of the plat the drone is located at before we take the flight. So we'll see how it goes. And I hope that people can see it and it's not skipping too much. So Darren will put the drone up in a usual spot, and it depends on where on site we are, but we try to start at the same location. So for this flyover, you can see there was a lot of, they had a lot of open areas that their source control was lacking. That pond, when we measured it, it was not as bad as the others for the turbidity, but it does appear to be that way. So we still contacted them about that. And another example here of a flyover on an individual site. So you can see construction entrances. They've taken the silt fence down at these ones because those slope towards the road. They had wattles set up near the sidewalks for containment on site there at those 2 lots that we just flew over. But you'll see interspersed BMPs throughout these different sites here. We tend to not allow straw as a BMP on anything over about 5 acres. So for a large scale plat like this, they've got to use a different alternative, which is why you're seeing so much blanket rolled out and plastic and stuff like that. Individual lots, we will allow them to do straw as a BMP. We've just had really bad luck with straw because the wind and the weather tends to move most of the straw that gets placed around all over the site, and it's just not effective for us on large plats like this where you know, there's a good wind fetch and it might be moving materials that may or may not on smaller plats. So there's the video showing that footage there of the pond that was the red flag for the outfall. So what these guys ended up doing was taking all of their ponds and getting big pumps and pumping them down to this lower pond here for treatment. So they did a controlled flow into the pond that we're kind of hovering over here. And then they all their turbid water came down to that pond, and then they treated it there with the Kaida sand before it was discharged into a wetland complex adjacent, flow controlled and everything else adjacent to the plat. So yeah, there's a lot going on you can see here that we've got to keep track of. with these different sites all at the same time, between survey grade changes, the consistency of what's happening on the roads, track out management. You can see there's a lot of people working out here and a lot of activity. You can see the orange pump here that they were using for moving water out of this facility into the other pond down towards the beginning there. But there's 4 large ponds at this plat, and they're big. They're about 8.5 acre feet each. So we had a lot of work ahead of us to stay on top of what was going on here. And these guys had an incredibly aggressive schedule to be able to build this plat out and keep it stabilized at the same time. So the drone really came in handy for us to be able to cover sites like this. And like Darren was saying, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 plats about this size in town here. And I don't know if you can see, but my dogs get to go on inspections with us sometimes too. So they're out doing grass coverage. No, they're not. They're just playing. But yeah, so here's one of the back ponds here that's really, it was really hard for us to get to before they punched the road in, that now we can get to, we were able to get to fairly easily with the drone, but now that they've gotten the road grade establishment back here, we were able to drive and actually set up for our observations.